Perfect. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the newest installment of acework webinars, this time about employee engagement, which is a topic that many people requested last time. So that's why we're doing it today. I want to introduce you to Cornelia, who is assisting me today, which means giving me a ping when the quality or the connection is getting lost, and we'll also do the Q&A at the end together. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Find the right one. I want to do this one. Yes. Okay. Cornelia, maybe you can tell me if you guys can see the screen.
Yeah, it works well.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so basically the topic is how to keep remote employees motivated and engaged. The main reason for the webinar was that sort of the excitement of work from home has worn off for many people that had to work at home suddenly because of coronavirus. And the question was, how can we keep those people engaged, motivated and productive while they're at home? All right. The first thing that I always start our webinars with since COVID became a pandemic was basically to point out that what is happening right now isn't what we remote workers would call remote work, right? This is definitely an emergency situation for us as well. And yeah, we'd probably just call it like working from home more than remote work, which for us can be freely choosing where you want to work. And right now we're very much confined. But that's always what I wanted to start with. But the next thing that I kind of want to point out is from that work from home experiment that we're in, we need to look into the future and kind of, put into our minds like why working flexibly in the future must be just as important, that can be work from home, that can be co-working spaces, cafes, and so on. And those numbers here are actually not new. This is something that people in the remote workspace have known for a while, for a long time actually, and there have been a lot of studies proving all of these. It kind of starts off with the fact that flexible working fosters productivity and engagement of your employees. And on average, they're 35 to 40% more productive than their in-office counterparts. The next thing is that, sorry, I'm gonna move you guys here, is actually that you can increase the retention of your employees and attract more talent, right? And what they've seen in companies that offer flexible working is that they have about 25% lower employee attrition or churn, right? People leaving the company. And finally, working flexibly, of course, also reduces costs significantly and can really drive the competitiveness of a company. And this number actually comes from the US. I just transferred it to euros. So it's $11,000, so about 10,000 euros per full-time, FTE, full-time employee per year that a company can save when they allow them to work flexibly. That doesn't even mean fully remotely, by the way. That just means working flexibly, some days at the office, some days not at the office. That's all that it means. But this can only happen when your employees are engaged, right? When they are motivated to bring their best to work every day. And remote working can also lead to people checking out from work, and it's making it much harder for people to figure out when their employees have checked out. But what we wanted to look at here is actually the current challenges of your distributed workforce, right? Like, why could they not be engaged and motivated right now?
Yes, screen is black. Sorry, Angelina. But
oh, hold on.
I can only see a black and white line on it.
You can only see a black and white line. That's not good.
Seconds ago.
Like this?
No.
Can you see it again? Okay, let me stop sharing. And start share again. Thanks, Cornelia. There we go. Share.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay.
Cool. I can also maximize it. Maybe it looks a little better, huh? Like this?
Yeah, right.
Better? Okay, cool. Yeah, so what I was going to say is that, you know, none of this can happen, these benefits of working flexibly, unless you have engaged and motivated employees. And what is currently keeping them, you know, from being their best self at work, right? That could be general distractions, that could be problems with their routine, and it could also, of course, be insecurity and fear that comes with, you know, a global crisis, right? As simple as that. In terms of distractions, I think they can be so manifold, and most of us have experienced them in the past 2 months. That could be additional personal responsibilities, for example, right? Like homeschooling or taking care of, you know, an elderly person, any of these kind of things. But it could also have that in combination with, for example, an inadequate work environment. Right, so working at the kitchen table, having your kids sitting next to you doing their homework, not being able to fully focus is just one of those examples, right? And then I think the third one there is something I've definitely felt as well, which is that because of shutdown, and in some countries it's been worse, and in others it has been better, lack of work-life balance, of course, you know, when everything is closed and there's not much else you can do, a lot of people have just worked more in the past couple of months. When it comes to routine problems, actually can go in two directions, right? I've had both of those happen to me personally, where I thought, oh, Jesus, every day looks the same, you know, especially when I work a lot and don't do much else. You know, you kind of have that Groundhog Day problem where you just think, okay, I wake up and it's just the same as yesterday. And then on the other hand, and I think that is probably something that parents feel more, is that they don't have enough stability and a routine, and that just, you know, they have to juggle too many things and they can't really get into a productive rhythm. And finally, insecurity and fear is, of course, also something very personal and something that many employees have asked themselves, you know, and maybe also have asked their boss is my job even safe? You know, with many industries being so affected, and many companies having to lay off a lot of their employees, I think that is a very valid question to ask, and it is something, you know, that as an employer you have to take into account and that you have to address. Kind of with that come, you know, financial problems, of course, but they can also, you know, come from other reasons. You know, going from, I don't know, people having vacations booked and, you know, not getting their money back and those kind of things. But also personal and family health, of course, you know, a lot of people have elderly folk, you know, parents that they're worried about, or, you know, someone who's in a risk group. And of course, that's a very valid fear to have. And then finally, I guess an uncertain future is just something that we are all facing, and that can be daunting at times as well. And from a manager's perspective, you know, a lot of this seems kind of out of your control, right? That you think, well, yeah, this is like my employees' problems, you know, and they have the power to change those. But actually, it's very much your problem too, right? Because all of these influence and block your employees' productivity, and basically you must do your best to support them there so they can bring their best self to work. Okay, I'm trying not to make this happen again with a black screen. You guys still see this? Right, so basically employee engagement is what we want to have, right? We want to have people that bring their best self to work every day, and basically enable them, you know, to do that work to a degree, you know, that's not only that they're happy, but also, of course, that we get the most out of, you know, out of the distributed team that we're facing or that we're working with right now. And this is actually quite a good summary of employee engagement and how it is influenced by different factors. If you're interested, I can send the article where I got this from later on. And it basically says that employee engagement is mainly influenced by three conditions, right? The first one is the meaningfulness of the job, right? That goes with the purpose of work in both the individual and the team way. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. The next one is safety, right? Especially psychological safety that is driven by the relationships and group dynamics that are happening in the company. And finally, it's also about the availability of the individual, right? That's their physical and emotional energy that enables them or prevents them from bringing the best self to work. Right. Meaningfulness is such a big topic that I decided to keep it very brief, because I'm sure everyone has, heard a lot about vision, mission, and values. But I still wanted to, touch upon it very briefly, right? The question is essentially, why are we working? And there are two parts to it. There's the collective, the company, the team, and then also the individual reason, why are we working, aside from obviously, the financial benefit that we hopefully receive from it. But as a collective, we're driven by sort of one goal that we want to push forward, right? You can break that down. You have your vision, what you want the company to be, the mission, what you want to achieve, and also the values that unite you as a team. And in all honesty, for companies that were not remote or distributed before coronavirus and had that happen to them very rapidly and very suddenly, the ones that have a strong vision and mission driven culture and have values that unite them, they tend to do better, right? We've seen that also with overall distributed companies. They also always have very strong values that bind them. And it is definitely something that you can't just manufacture, create like a nice page where you write that down and, you want to get your employees on board with that. I think it is something that develops over time, that has been shaped over time. So there's no real quick fix to this if you suddenly realize like, oh, actually we are not driven by the same values and don't have a unifying mission. But it is something that you can build over time if you feel it now really lacking. On the individual side, it is actually, not just money that we receive from a job, right? It is being part of that collective, but also what does my work contribute to my self-worth, right? And I think that's something that's not looked at enough on the individual level. A lot of people don't even openly ask themselves about this or reflect on it. Like, why do I have this job? Is it the status that I get from it? Is it, because I think what I'm doing is incredibly cool, like all these different reasons that people can have, right? And that really pays towards that employee engagement, right? If I feel like I'm self-actualizing in my job, then of course I'm going to be a lot more engaged, right? Okay, this just jumped over. Next up is psychological safety, or just safety, right? And that kind of goes with the question how we can support each other, because to feel safe, I think as an individual, the group has to contribute that that feeling of safety for sure. So it is a big part of team culture, but it's also a big part of individual relationships. I don't want to call it friendships, between colleagues, for example. If you have one buddy that you always get coffee with and, you can trust about, speaking about your worries at work and so on. And then finally, of course, it's definitely a leader's responsibility as well to make their employees feel safe. And the risk for remote teams that I've seen quite a bit is that, when you have a Zoom call, for example, and people want to get their word in or like get their opinion heard, it is sometimes a little bit hard for people that, are not the most outspoken or the quickest to be heard, right? So having that space for them in a virtual or video chat environment can be harder, and that can actually negatively contribute to the psychological safety of the team. But what can we do to make that better, right? I wanted to not stay, with meaningfulness. It was very abstract about vision and mission. I wanted to just give like a couple of actionable tips or tricks that you can use, but you must not use. Again, it depends on what your team looks like. But yeah, the ones that we really liked, that my colleague Farin and I researched and have seen in companies, and some we're using ourselves, are, for example, Slack channels that a lot of companies, have used Slack before. Some of them are, some companies are just using Slack now, for example, or you are using a different messenger service. Like, I don't want to make this a brand or tool promo here, but it is, for every direct messenger tool that you use. Public channels is something that can be very, very powerful, right? And instead of having people, or remind people to, stay on topic in a specific channel, when they want to talk about something like, parent issues, just create a new channel like that, right? There's tons of companies that now have new channels about parent sanity or work from home or these kind of things where people can just exchange that, that feeling and, relate to each other on that level. Another one that is probably also not for all teams, but is something I think can be very powerful is a gratitude challenge, which comes a little bit from this, inspirational influencer area, I'd say, but it can be very powerful, where you encourage everyone to write down one thing that they're grateful for per day for a month or a week or however long you want to do it. And you can even do that publicly, right? In a very simply, doesn't need a tool, doesn't need anything to pay for. Just do it in a Google Doc, in a Google sheet, right? Or an Excel sheet, where everyone can fill in their one thing they're grateful for during that day. I think that can really also contribute to that, to that team culture and team spirit. Another one is group games that we haven't done, but I think there are some companies where that works really well, that just have a playful culture, that just play different types of online games together. And, some of them cost money. So I think as an employer, it could be very useful to just, sponsor one of them. For relationships, it is again, something that if you had an office buddy, you probably going to naturally gravitate towards hanging out with them virtually as well, right? But if you don't have that, you could also consider just buddying up people, right? For accountability and motivation specifically, but also just, for them to have someone in the company they can talk to. What we're doing quite a bit recently is we co-work more than we used to on a tool called Tandem, which, just lets you work alongside each other, but you can also, as if you were in an office environment, quickly say something or like bounce an idea off the other person. Another one, typo here, encourage virtual coffee breaks. Can be something that just naturally happened, but it can also be something that completely got lost when people transitioned from an office to the remote environment, because they decide to just have a coffee break also with their family, which I think is normal and important, but encourage people, to just hang out virtually a little bit and, have their personal conversations that they would normally maybe have in an office. Lunch and learns is something that we have done at hybrid companies, especially. So companies that have offices and then had some remote employees. And hosting a lunch and learn can mean many things, right? It essentially means, okay, you can either sponsor lunch or people, cook, bring their own lunch, whatever. And then you have a topic that everyone learns about. And that could be an external person that you have coming in, with an inspirational topic that you think people should know about. Or it could be someone in the company who has a topic that they're incredibly passionate about that has nothing to do with work, whether that's, I don't know, planting lemon trees or, building model train systems, whatever, and just share that with the team because it really opens up something new about their personality and also, encourages a conversation with the team on another level that is just straight up work related. And finally, I guess leadership is, of course, also a super important driver of psychological safety in the team. And the general gist there, and I guess that's pretty abstract again, is to create a challenging but non-threatening environment, right? That is something that is not easy, but I think what, as a leader, you don't want to do right now is you kind of want to, wrap your employees in bubble wrap and tell them everything's going to be fine. Because I think they probably want to hear, what is really going on and still want to, be enabled and challenged at work with new projects, with things that maybe they're not completely obvious to them. Because that means you also have to, switch your brains on and, feel that, okay, I'm motivated, I'm trying to learn something here. Another thing, of course, especially in a crisis, is to keep communicating and communicate when things change, right? You can always set a policy, but also be open to have that policy change when the situation evolves, right? And communicate then again about the new policy. I think it is more of like a loop there than a definite, this is what we're doing and this is our course and we'll stick to it, especially with a situation that's so unpredictable. Because that way people also feel that, they can speak up, they can maybe question some things, and they can generally feel safer and feel a little bit more involved in what's going on. And finally, transparency is a really big topic, and something that when you're an entrepreneur, when you're a manager, I think you learn really quickly is you want to be transparent, but you kind of also know you must be as transparent as possible, because there are some things, that as a manager is just, that's what managers also must do, is just kind of have that overview and kind of know, okay, this is what should stay with management and be dealt with, instead of, putting every, also fear and uncertainty on the employees as well. And that goes for job security specifically, right? You want to be transparent and honest about what's going on. But yeah, I think what's very challenging is when you have had layoffs and you want to make sure that the survivors, the people that are still at the company, still feel safe, and how to address them. There's 2 really good articles about that I'm also happy to share, by the way, because I think we want to move on a little bit. By the way, if you guys have any questions, of course, post them in the chat. We will, address them later, because right now I can't see them when I have the screen share, so I apologize. All right, jumping over to availability, right? That essentially means how much you as an employee can show up today and every day, right? And that is driven by several factors, right? Of course, it's just the overall energy that you have. That's, that can be physical, can be your body, but it's also emotional, right? If you have big worries and fears, that can inhibit your energy as well. And then the last one is confidence, confidence in yourself, in how good you are at your job, and these kind of elements, that make you want to, be your best at work. For employers, there's a lot you can actually do to boost that availability, right? Even though it's an individual aspect, I think there's a lot you can do. On the physical energy, a very simple one is to sponsor fitness apps, similar to how, here in Berlin, a lot of companies sponsor gym memberships. I think sponsoring fitness apps is similar or the same idea. Doing that for home workouts right now is very simple to do. There's lots of good deals, very easy to, encourage people to get moving. Even better probably is to organize mini workouts together. And I saw that recently, that a company does like work sessions together, and then they have mini breaks where they maybe not call it a workout, but at least like a stretching, get the blood flowing, kind of 2, 3, 5 minute session together to really boost that energy again. And something else that a company told me recently is that they imposed a mandatory break, which they didn't have before. It's a company that's based in New York, and they sent everyone home, of course. New York is on lockdown, and they decided we're going to have like one block in the middle of the day. It's like a lunch break where everyone will be offline, and it's a kind of a mandatory thing, right? And I'm not sure, people that would probably still work during lunch, that are, if they're still doing it, but generally that's the break when, you're not supposed to ping your colleagues, that there's no activity on Slack, no emails, nothing. And I think that can be quite useful to recharge energy, but it doesn't work in all teams. So I think there's some teams that have people that need the flexibility to have their lunch break the hour that they want, and not, between 12:30 and 1:30. Finally, not finally, but almost there, 2 more. For emotional energy, I think it is definitely a manager's responsibility also to have those mental health check-ins, right? To have open conversations about just the state of mind, being careful with, of course, like how far you can go, like how much people open up. But I think the general rule here is probably leading by example, right? So sharing openly about your own mental health can really help other people, do the same. Okay, access to meditation apps is, of course, something that can incredibly boost your emotional energy and stability, but also your physical energy, I guess. But it is also something that's not for everyone. It's been a big trend, and I think a lot of people are open to trying it now. And it could be something that if you were to sponsor it, maybe more people would try it. But it's definitely not everyone's cup of tea. And finally, there's a really nice exercise that we have used in the acework team before, which is called If You Knew Me Really Well, which is something that you can start off meetings with, or, having meetings, or like, conversations between multiple people, where you, before you jump into your work-related topics, you share something, somewhat personal by saying, if you knew me really well, you would know that last night I didn't sleep well, or I'm worried about my dog because he's sick or something, which kind of has that immediate connection moment with the other person, because they're going to share something that's important to them at that point. And that can really help also, boost your own emotional energy and clear it up. Okay, finally, confidence is, of course, something that's super important in your motivation at work, right? Like, are you confident about what you're going to achieve today? Is it realistic? And is it maybe also, challenging to you? And to challenge your employees, something that's quite useful is called stretch projects. We did write a little bit about this in a previous blog article, which is explaining a little bit more what that means. But basically, it's a project where the employee doesn't already know everything about, right? So they learn on the project, essentially. What's really important there is that you set an environment where it's okay to fail, or to ask questions and do all of this, right? Which also really plays into that psychological safety element as well. What also is really important for confidence is to publicly celebrate successes. And I know that office companies have sometimes not done this enough, and not doing it in a remote environment can really hurt you. So if you've done it at an office, really good for you, of course. Keep doing that virtually. And for those that feel like maybe we could do this more, very simple to do through Slack channels. There's something called a taco bot that allows you to give tacos, which means big props or kudos to someone who did something well. In a Slack environment. There's tons of different ways to do it. I think it is really something, that can boost confidence for everyone, and, pay into that employee engagement. Okay, regular check-ins, one-on-one check-ins with direct reports is, I think, probably a given. If you only do it once every quarter, consider maybe doing it once every month, or even once every week. It doesn't have to be super formal, right? I think that's something that often people that don't, or companies that don't have this culture of one-on-one check-ins, is you can have that as a standing meeting, and if there's nothing to talk about, you can skip it. But of course, just having a meeting that's 5 or 10 minutes for a check-in is also completely fine. It is something that in an office would maybe happen between the coffee machine and the way back to your desk, right? Can be something like that, or as easy as that, for sure. Okay. I know that this was probably a lot of information. Still, I would always encourage anyone who's looking to transition to remote working, or has already done it, to look at companies that have been fully distributed for quite a while and that are very good at writing content about that specifically. Those two here, Help, Scout, and Buffer, are two companies that we've worked with. They're great partners of ours, and they're very, very good at being super transparent about what they're doing on that management side. So I think just reading their blog can be very helpful for someone looking to, build better remote working structures. If you, are looking to make that transition, but you don't really know where to start, and you think, okay, just reading up on it doesn't really help. At acework, what we actually do is we have a remote work advisory where we transition teams from office to remote and help distributed teams to perform better, right? So this is something that, you can always reach out to us about, and, make sure that you maybe let us know where you found us, and we can then, have a strategy conversation about how we can help you best. Okay, I'm putting this up here so you guys have my email address, but I'm probably going to exit this screen, make it a little bit smaller for you guys, and would very much like for Cornelia to jump back on.
Yeah,
I can hear you. Okay, maybe I'm actually going to stop the screen share. Perfect. Ooh. Okay, perfect. And I can't even see the chat.
There's nothing in the chat yet.
Nothing going on. Okay, I think something that we learned from a previous webinar is that people really prefer just to listen in, to do whatever else on the side, which is completely fine. And I actually see Ed here as well. Hi, Ed. And that's kind of cool because I do that a lot too, where I just like put a webinar on and like cook lunch, which is fine. Cornelia, is there something that you maybe want to talk about that you have felt? Hey, Ed.
Hey, maybe Ed has a question for us.
or something to share. I know Ed's an expert.
Well, I don't want to interrupt what it seems like, you're going to continue with the agenda of the webinar. I have a few comments. I really like some of the things that you mentioned, that you brought up on how to keep remote employees engaged. I know it can be very challenging, and it's a challenge that we try to deal with all the time. I really like some of the things that you mentioned about, the gratitude channel. Actually, one of our recent hires implemented that on her own. And I thought it was really, really cool. And, not everyone is like fully engaged. Like some people like that kind of thing. Some other people don't. Another channel that's working super well right now, it's the music channel. So we have a bunch of musicians at the company, as a hobby. And we have a music channel, and then everyone shares what they like in terms of music. And it's way better than Spotify's algorithm to find music that you want to listen to while you work. So it's something that has worked really well for us. Everyone likes it, and maybe some other people wanna give it a shot. The transparency topic is a tough one because, and I think it's not exclusive to remote environments. I think it happens with traditional companies as well, where you want to make sure that the employee feels part of the company and that they know what's going on. But at the same time, you don't want to tell them, oh, you know what, we didn't close these deals that we wanted to close. And, next month, we don't really know if this is going to happen. So, that kind of thing, it's you don't need to disrupt their sleep with your worries as a manager. I don't think that's really productive. That's instead of making them feel more part of the company, they feel more stressed. And I don't think it's something healthy to do. Absolutely. But it's very important to, when there's new hires, introduce everyone, because it's not something that happens, naturally. You have to go and announce it to everyone, maybe organize a quick meeting for everyone to introduce themselves, because it's happened to us that once we onboard someone, after 1 or 2 weeks, they'll be like, oh, I had no idea that you work with us, and what do you do? And things like that. Yeah, I have a couple more comments, but I don't want to take over.
No, it's all good. It's super interesting, and also we haven't spoken in a while, so I'm just happy to see your face and have you check in. I'm through with the slides, so we theoretically, I planned this to be about 45 minutes. I'm going to stop the recording, and since we're not that many people, we can also just have a conversation